What's up guys, welcome back. This is anime fiction. You'll be watching What If Naruto Was Reborn as the Emperor of Viltrumites Part 7. Now, let's begin. The night sky above the Global Defense Agency headquarters sparkled with stars, their brilliance unaffected by the city's illumination far beneath. The rooftop, typically reserved for maintenance personnel and security teams, had transformed into an unforeseen haven of tranquility ahead of the impending storm. Naruto positioned himself at the edge of the roof, his substantial figure outlined by the starlit horizon. The battle beast coat rested on his shoulders, subtly shifting with the night breeze as he looked upward, his expression thoughtful. The Emperor maintained a stoic demeanor as he contemplated the constellations of this earth. The gentle sound of footsteps interrupted his meditation. Without turning, he discerned the approaching figure through the distinct pattern of their breathing and the subtlety of their footsteps. Oliver, he acknowledged as the young half-Viltrumite came into view at the edge of his peripheral vision. "Uncle Naruto," Oliver exclaimed, his voice reflecting a blend of enthusiasm and hesitation. "I was unaware of your presence here. I came to observe the stars. My mother advises that I should attempt to rest, yet I find myself too enthusiastic about everything." Naruto maintained a composed demeanor, neither encouraging nor rejecting the boy's presence. Following a brief pause, Oliver positioned himself next to him, his legs suspended over the roof's edge. The juxtaposition between the two was notable, the imposing emperor and the diminutive boy, distinguished by size, authority, and the burden of history, yet linked by the peculiar turn of fate that rendered them, in a certain regard, kin. "The stars appear unchanged from this vantage point," Oliver remarked, aligning his gaze with Naruto's upward direction. "Are they identical in your universe as well?" "The stellar configurations are identical," Naruto affirmed, although the civilizations that inhabit them vary considerably in certain instances. Oliver expressed his admiration, his eyes reflecting a sense of awe. "Have you visited all of them?" "The stars, I mean?" "Not all," Naruto responded. "The universe is expansive, even for someone with my extensive experience." Oliver nodded with consideration, swinging his legs in the open air. "What is your age, if you don't mind me asking?" "My biological father never provided me with much information about Viltrumites prior to his departure." Naruto contemplated the inquiry, assessing the importance of accuracy in relation to the boy's probable understanding. "I have been in existence for millennia," he remarked succinctly, "since prior to the civil war that significantly impacted our species." Oliver quietly expressed his astonishment. "That is quite dated. Have you always held the title of Emperor?" "No," Naruto clarified. "I ascended to the position of Grand Regent following the passing of Emperor Argal. It was only recently that I took on the imperial title myself." "Emperor Argal," Oliver reiterated, evaluating the name. "That is my grandfather, correct?" "He is my father's father?" Naruto's expression changed slightly, a subtle softening around the eyes that would have gone unnoticed by anyone unfamiliar with him. "Indeed. Argal was your grandfather, although neither your father nor you had the opportunity to know him." "What was his character?" Oliver inquired, his interest apparent. "Did he possess strength comparable to yours?" Before Naruto could respond, the sound of additional footsteps interrupted the moment. Both individuals shifted their attention to Nolan, who was approaching with an expression of uncertainty as he assessed the unexpected duo. "I sincerely apologize for the intrusion," Nolan stated with formality. "I intended to discuss battle strategy, but it appears you are currently engaged." Naruto observed Nolan intently, recognizing the tension in his stance and the cautious manner in which he assessed Oliver, this child who embodied both the essence of his son and yet remained distinct. "We invite you to join us," he stated at last. The young man inquired about Argal. Nolan's expression changed to one of astonishment and subtly masked curiosity. Although he had come to understand his heritage within their world, he possessed no personal recollections of the father he had never encountered. "May I?" he inquired, indicating the area next to Oliver. Naruto acknowledged with a nod, and Nolan took a seat, finalizing their distinctive trio: Emperor, Prince, and the young boy who bridged their worlds. "Emperor Argal was the most esteemed ruler Viltrum has ever known," Naruto began, his deep voice resonating clearly in the night air. "While he may not have been the most physically robust, that distinction belonged to me. His strength of character and vision for our people exceeded that of anyone else." Oliver leaned forward with anticipation, while Nolan listened intently, eager for any details regarding the father he had never met. "He discovered me during my youth," Naruto continued, his gaze shifting back to the stars. "I had already demonstrated remarkable potential, even by Viltrumite standards. While others perceived only a tool to be refined, Argal recognized something greater. "Did he take you in?" Oliver inquired. "Is it similar to an adoption?" In a manner of speaking, Naruto acknowledged with a nod. Viltrumites do not establish familial connections in the same manner as humans. Offspring are nurtured by the state, conditioned to fulfill the Empire's objectives. However, Argal made a notable exception in my situation. "What was that experience like?" Nolan inquired gently, unable to suppress his curiosity about the father he had never known. Naruto remained quiet for an extended period, his demeanor contemplative as recollections emerged from the depths of ancient history. "I recall," he started, his tone adopting a nuance unfamiliar to both Nolan and Oliver. "A day when I was, in a sense, akin to a human adolescent in my development, despite being merely a few years old by your standards. I have just successfully completed a combat trial against 5 adult warriors simultaneously, a challenge that no young Viltrumite has ever overcome before." Recollection. The training arena's floor bore the marks of battle, some of his own, but the majority belonging to those he had bested. Naruto stood at the center, breathing heavily yet maintaining a composed stance, his youthful physique already displaying the strength that would eventually establish him as the most formidable of his kind. Surrounding him were the incapacitated bodies of 5 distinguished warriors, each at least 3 times his age, all vanquished through a blend of formidable strength and strategic acumen that surpassed his experience. The observers, comprising military commanders, genetic specialists, and combat instructors, engaged in quiet discussions, their expressions reflecting a blend of approval and apprehension regarding the remarkable potential exhibited by the young Viltrumite. "Impressive," a voice remarked from the entrance to the arena. Naruto pivoted, promptly kneeling as Emperor Argal entered the training area with purpose. Tall and powerfully built, with a presence that exuded authority, Argal approached the kneeling youth. "Stand up," he instructed. Naruto complied immediately, standing at attention with impeccable posture, undeterred by the injuries he had incurred during the combat trial. "You have successfully defeated 5 of my elite warriors," Argal noted, circling Naruto with deliberation. "Experienced warriors with centuries of combat expertise." "Yes, Emperor," Naruto responded, his tone measured and composed. "How?" Argal inquired succinctly. Naruto paused, unsure of the appropriate reaction anticipated. "I took advantage of their vulnerabilities, Emperor. Their overconfidence. Their belief that greater experience would prevail over greater strength. And did it?" Argal inquired. "No, Emperor. While experience holds significant value, it must be complemented by the ability to adapt. They engaged in battle according to their training. I approached the fight with the necessary strategies to secure victory." A subtle smile graced Argal's lips, a rare expression on a Viltrumite visage. "Well articulated." He addressed the onlookers. "Please exit." The commanders and specialists left promptly, leaving the Emperor and the young warrior alone in the blood-stained arena. "Please accompany me," Argal instructed, making his way toward the exit. Naruto walked alongside him, keeping a respectful distance as they navigated the corridors of the Imperial Training Facility. They remained silent until they arrived at a private chamber, Argal's personal study within the complex. "Are you aware of the reasons behind my interest in your development, Naruto?" Argal inquired once the door had closed behind them. "I possess strength, Emperor," Naruto responded confidently. "I contribute to the Empire's success with efficiency. Numerous individuals exhibit strength," Argal responded. "Many contribute effectively. Your uniqueness sets you apart in a distinct manner." Naruto chose to remain silent, unsure of how to articulate his response. Argal approached a viewing portal that provided a panoramic view of the capital city, its shining spires ascending toward the heavens. "What do you observe?" he inquired, indicating the vista. Naruto advanced, observing the urban landscape with keen interest. "I acknowledge Viltrum, Emperor. It represents the core of our empire. Please examine the matter more thoroughly," Argal advised. "Beyond the structures. Beyond the systems. What is your perspective?" Naruto deliberated on the question thoughtfully. "I understand. Order," he stated at last. "Accuracy. Intent." Argal nodded in agreement. "That is the reason I have chosen to take a personal interest in you, Naruto. When others observe, they perceive only dominance and victory. You recognize structure. Intent. The essential foundations upon which genuine civilization should be established." He positioned himself to confront the young Viltrumite directly. "Strength devoid of purpose lacks significance. Conquest absent of vision is hollow. The true measure of a leader is not in the number of worlds he can conquer, but in the number he can uplift. Elevate, Emperor? Naruto inquired, the notion unfamiliar to him. To elevate, Argal clarified. To enhance. To convert disorder into structure, frailty into resilience, and possibility into success. The fundamental objective of the Viltrum Empire is not solely conquest, but the pursuit of perfection. He placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, a gesture of physical contact that is quite rare in Viltrumite culture. You will undoubtedly be the strongest of our race, Naruto. This is already a certainty. However, I am committed to ensuring that you also possess great wisdom. Naruto remained completely motionless, feeling the significant impact of the Emperor's hand and words bearing down on him. I will not disappoint you, Emperor, he assured, his youthful voice resonating with the unwavering conviction that would characterize him for centuries ahead. No, Argal concurred, a hint of pride evident in his eyes. You will not. With Naruto's voice now hushed, the rooftop remained still, interrupted only by the faint sounds of the city beneath. Oliver regarded him with clear admiration, while Nolan's face reflected a nuanced blend of emotions. Amazement, remorse, pride, and a profound sorrow for the father he would never have the chance to meet. Oliver finally expressed his enthusiasm, stating, "That is fantastic. I regret not having the opportunity to meet him. My grandfather appears to have been quite remarkable." Naruto's expression subtly softened as he gazed down at the boy. "Indeed," he concurred, extending his hand to tousle Oliver's hair. "I wish you had the opportunity to know him too." Nolan observed this interaction with keen interest. "I appreciate you sharing that," he said quietly. Historical records highlight Argal's military accomplishments and his contributions to the expansion of the Empire. However, they provide limited insight into his personal character. History documents actions, not intentions, Naruto stated. It is not the private moments that influence those actions. Was he? Nolan paused briefly, then continued with determination. Did he fulfill his role as a father? Specifically, in terms of how he raised you? Naruto contemplated this question with great thoughtfulness. By Viltrumite standards, yes. He was exceptional. By human standards. He paused, carefully considering his choice of words. By human standards, he may have appeared strict, exacting, and inflexible. However, he was also equitable, reliable, and sincerely committed to my growth beyond simple usefulness to the Empire. Oliver observed the interaction between them, his youthful intellect analyzing this intricate relationship. It seems that you both have become an integral part of my family dynamic. One of you represents an alternate version of my biological father, while the other is my uncle, who is the sibling of my father's alternate self. The inquiry was surprisingly straightforward, exhibiting a childlike simplicity regarding their unusual relationship, leaving both adult Viltrumites momentarily speechless. The familial designations are quite intricate, Naruto acknowledged finally. However, it is sufficiently accurate in essence, Nolan remarked, surprising both himself and Naruto with his concurrence. Oliver smiled, evidently satisfied with this response. That's great, I've transitioned from not having a father figure to now having one, along with an uncle. The corner of Naruto's mouth twitched, suggesting the possibility of a smile. It is time to return inside, he stated, standing up with a smooth elegance that belied his considerable stature. The impending conflict necessitates the completion of all preparations. Nolan also rose, extending his hand to Oliver, who accepted it promptly. The trio proceeded back toward the rooftop access door. Upon their descent, they encountered Levi in the primary operations center, encircled by his dimensional monitors, his demeanor focused as he analyzed the readings. He stood upright as they entered, giving a courteous nod to Naruto. Emperor, he recognized. I was on the verge of reaching out to you. Provide the report, Naruto instructed, as he approached the monitors for evaluation. Levi noted that his counterpart seems to have ceased the introduction of further invincibles, while he adjusted one of the displays to highlight the warehouse where the malevolent marks had assembled. The final count stands at 18. They have been formulating strategies for the past hour, segmenting the city into sectors for methodical dismantling. What is the time remaining until they initiate their attack? Naruto inquired. It will take around 2 hours, Levi responded. They are anticipating nightfall to enhance disorder and reduce visibility for those defending. Naruto acknowledged the information, analyzing it with his usual effectiveness. This is adequate. Is that sufficient? Nolan inquired. Affirmative, Naruto stated. I will now proceed personally to carry out all of them. The statement, presented with an air of assuredness, elicited a wave of surprise throughout the room. Royal Mark and Royal Eve, who had been engaged in discussion with Cecil nearby, turned in surprise. Conquest, positioned at the main entrance, straightened with newfound interest. Emperor Nolan began with careful consideration. With all due respect, that would pose significant risks. Even for you, facing 18 opponents of Viltrumite caliber at the same time, 18 children, Naruto stated with a hint of dismissal. They exhibit a lack of training, discipline, and proper tactical coordination. Consequently, they do not pose a significant threat. However, Emperor Royal Mark interjected, stepping forward to engage in the discussion. Even if each individual possesses only half my strength, that still represents. You are making a calculation based on your own capabilities, Naruto interjected. This does not belong to me. Amanda and Roberta shared a glance, engaging in a wordless communication between them. Roberta was the one who spoke, her voice maintaining its characteristic analytical precision, yet infused with a slight hint of emotion that only those closest to her could perceive. It is statistically futile to attempt to dissuade the Emperor, she noted. His evaluation of the threat level is precise. Given his capabilities, 18 Mark Graysons, irrespective of their enhancements or ethical stance, pose a negligible threat. Amanda concurred, positioning herself next to Naruto, the crimson cape elegantly draping over her shoulders. You are considering this from your viewpoint, rather than his. She gazed up at Naruto, a subtle smile gracing her lips. I would appreciate the opportunity to test something, if that is agreeable to you. I have been experiencing an increase in strength. Naruto raised an eyebrow, directing his full attention towards Amanda. Please provide a detailed explanation. Amanda chose to close her eyes in concentration rather than respond verbally. A nuanced alteration commenced to manifest across her figure, not the striking metamorphosis they had previously observed, characterized by its sudden expansion and gender transition, but rather an evolution that was more measured, more sophisticated. Her height increased gradually until she reached a stature nearly a foot taller than before, her clothing adjusted accordingly, although she remained more than a head shorter than Naruto. Her skin adopted a subtle green tint, while her hair transitioned to a deep black, cascading longer down her back. Upon opening her eyes, they revealed a rich, forest green color. The crimson cape, adorned with a white sash, now complemented her transformed figure more appropriately, no longer trailing on the ground but still cascading elegantly behind her. She rotated slowly, the transformation finalized, and regarded Naruto with a look of inquiry. How'd I look? She inquired, her voice maintaining its quality yet somehow deeper, more resonant. Naruto's eyes widened noticeably, showcasing an uncommon expression of authentic surprise from the Emperor. The beauty before him was unexpected, not merely the raw power of her monstrous form, but something more refined, more composed, more aligned with his own aesthetics. He swiftly regained his composure, crossing his arms over his chest to uphold his dignified presence. When did this development occur? He inquired, maintaining a neutral tone while his gaze revealed a clear interest. Roberta advanced, providing an explanation. Amanda aimed to enhance her proficiency both as your partner and as a fighter, she clarified. We worked together to analyze the fundamental aspects of her curse, which seemed to possess both genetic and spiritual dimensions. Drawing upon the insights from the records of the demon detective Damien Darkblood, she continued, we successfully employed a blend of mystical invocations alongside my molecular manipulation skills to alter the manifestation of the curse. In contrast to Eve, I do not experience any mental barriers when it comes to manipulating organic matter. However, we undertook comprehensive external testing beforehand to guarantee safety. The theory was straightforward, Roberta explained. By aligning the cursed form more closely with Amanda's true essence, female rather than male, we could achieve a more harmonious transformation that would enhance power efficiency rather than reduce it. The results are as presented, she concluded, gesturing toward Amanda. While this iteration may not possess the same physical presence as her former monstrous form, it attains enhanced strength through an improved alignment of soul and body. In a manner akin to Viltrumite women, who can attain strength that rivals or surpasses that of their male counterparts despite less pronounced muscular development, this is attributed to the effectiveness of their smart atom distribution. Amanda approached Naruto, a playful smile gracing her now green-tinged lips. I would like to test my new strength, she requested, her tone both warm and resolute. I am eager to explore my capabilities. Naruto observed her intently, his expression both discerning and admiring. With remarkable speed that astonished even those accustomed to his agility, he extended his hand and secured her by the waist, drawing her body close to his. Amanda emitted a surprised gasp, her cheeks taking on a deeper shade of green as she realized she was positioned against the Emperor's chest. "I will test you now," Naruto stated, his voice reflecting an unusual sense of satisfaction. Before anyone could respond, he lowered his head and pressed his lips against hers, kissing her with an intensity he had never previously attempted in her human form, concerned it might lead to harm. The kiss conveyed a deep sense of passion and possession, unmistakably signaling his approval without any ambiguity. Upon his eventual release, Amanda seemed somewhat disoriented, her augmented physique swaying momentarily before stabilizing. The Eves exhibited a deep flush and averted their gaze, while both marks displayed an unexpected focus on the ceiling or floor, anywhere but the situation at hand. "You have certainly demonstrated your strength," Naruto remarked with a sense of approval. Similar to a typical Viltrumite, possibly exceeding that. He directed his gaze towards Roberta, his demeanor transforming to one of sincere gratitude. "Your input in this development is acknowledged and appreciated." In a surprising turn of events, particularly for Roberta, Naruto approached her, delicately raised her chin with a single finger, and bestowed a kiss upon her lips. This interaction, in contrast to the enthusiastic dialogue with Amanda, was more succinct and formal, while still conveying clear significance. As he withdrew, Roberta remained motionless, her typically composed demeanor transformed into one of astonished disbelief. Amanda, having regained her composure, smiled playfully at her friend's response. The silence that ensued was interrupted by Oliver, who had observed the entire interaction with the keen interest characteristic of youth. "Uncle Naruto," he inquired with emphasis, "will you be engaging with them now and addressing the conflict later, or shall we prioritize confronting the evil marks first?" The straightforwardness of the question, presented with an air of innocent sincerity, elicited a moment of profound astonishment in the room. Nolan appeared horrified, Conquest's scarred face froze in shock, and Cecil appeared to be planning the quickest route to the nearest escape. And then something unprecedented happened. Naruto laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh filled the room, leaving everyone stunned. Even Conquest, who had known Naruto for millennia, hadn't seen him laugh. As his laughing stopped, Naruto reached out and gently brushed Oliver's hair. "No, young one," he responded, his voice full of warmth that few had ever experienced from him. "We will go and fight." Internally, however, a more calculating pattern of ideas was forming, wondering how quickly he could control this world. To keep the boy as part of the family, unwilling to part with someone he has learned to care for, no matter how short their time together. Oliver beamed up at him, evidently thrilled to have amused his uncle, entirely unaware of how he had just cemented the Emperor's determination to rule the globe. Naruto turned to face the group, his countenance returning to normal, albeit with a tiny softness around his eyes that had not before existed. "Prepare for departure," he ordered. "We will confront these variants marks at their gathering point before they can disperse across the city." As the others hurried to obey, Levi gave the exact coordinates of the warehouse where the evil invincibles had congregated. Naruto, Amanda, Royal Mark, Royal Eve, Original Mark, Original Eve, Nolan, Conquest, and Roberta gathered near the exit, prepared to go. Just before they set off, Naruto paused to give a final order that sent shivers down most of their spines. "If any of you wish to test yourselves against one of these variants," he said politely, "you will need to act quickly. Once I have eliminated the first dozen or so, I will proceed to dispatch any that remain. Do not waste time if you desire the experience." The casual confidence with which he spoke about eradicating several Viltrumite-level threats, as if talking nothing more tough than a light workout, informed everyone there of Naruto's true identity. Not just an emperor, not just a conqueror, but the universe's most powerful being. As they rose to the skies, Royal Mark and Royal Eve exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. They were extremely fortunate that Naruto had chosen the peaceful method over the more destructive one. That he had discovered, deep in his ancient spirit, the knowledge Argal had glimpsed in him millennia before. Because soon, everyone will understand why the Emperor is known as the terror of the universe. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago pulsed with tension as 18 copies of Mark Grayson gathered on what had once been a production floor. Machinery sat idle around them, shrouded in dust and cobwebs, as silent witnesses to the unparalleled gathering of multiverse versions. Scarred Levi strode ahead of them, his deformed visage twitching sometimes as he described his strategy on a homemade digital board. The wicked marks observed with differing degrees of curiosity and skepticism, their postures and faces as varied as their clothes. "Once we launch the attack," Scarred Levi stated, waving to a map of Chicago. Each of you will take your assigned sector. Maximum destruction, maximum terror. I want this Mark to watch as everything he loves burns to ash. Mohawk Mark leaned against a support column, arms crossed across his chest. His unusual hairdo, shaved on the sides with a strip of hair down the center, complemented the defiant gleam in his eyes. Yeah, he drawled, staring at his fingernails with exaggerated boredom. Destroy everything and make him suffer, blah blah blah. Can we get to the point where you open portals to any universe we want? That's the only reason we're listening to your terrible revenge dream. Sinister Mark gave Mohawk a chilly gaze. Some of us actually appreciate the artistry of well-executed vengeance, he remarked, his tone ominous. When I break something, I make sure it stays broken. Ooh, scary, Mohawk said mockingly, pretending to tremble. Did you practice that line in the mirror this morning? Mustache Mark, with facial hair that exuded Viltrumite authority, stood between them. This bickering is beneath us, he said, his demeanor tight with military discipline. We're Viltrumites. Or at least, those of us who embraced our heritage are. The rest of you are merely playing at power. Save the superiority complex for someone who gives a damn, Mohawk responded. Not all of us needed Daddy's approval to figure out which end of the universe to piss on. Viltrumite Mark, dressed in the Empire's standard white uniform for the military elite, scoffed. Your vulgarity only confirms your inferiority, he said sternly. The weak exist to serve the strong. That is the truth of the universe. And I have no interest in debating reality. Oh look, another one who drank the Kool-Aid, Mohawk rolled his eyes. Did they make you recite the Viltrumite pledge before or after they fitted you for that cute little outfit? Omnimark, who had adopted his father's title and clothing in his universe, walked forward. His presence demanded attention, and his words carried the authority of someone accustomed to complete compliance. Enough, he said. My father was a fool. He hesitated. He doubted. None of us made that mistake, which is why we're here instead of dead or imprisoned like so many other versions of ourselves. Mark I, whose appearance was most similar to the original Mark of this planet but with minor marks of more experience, shook his head. I used to think there was always a right choice. Now I know, sometimes, there's just the choice you can live with. Spare us the philosophy, said Mark II, his costume similar to the original but with deeper colors. Talk all you want. At the end of the day, words won't stop fists. And mine move faster than yours. Yellow Suit Mark, dressed in an older superhero suit, moaned. Back when I started, I thought being a hero was simple. Now I know better, but at least I didn't become this. He motioned to the collected villainous versions of himself. Self-righteousness does not belong to you because you are another me. Flaxen Mark responded, his regal demeanor betraying his status as the Flaxen Dimension's ruler in actuality. The Flaxens do not take prisoners. We take victory, and I am their greatest conquest. A conquest that I will soon bestow upon more worlds. Bulletproof Mark, his outfit adorned with combat armor, simply shrugged. I don't fight for ideals. I fight to win. That's the only thing that matters in the end. Scarf Mark, wearing a large red scarf across his neck and lower face, remained in the shadows. The shadows teach you things that the light never will, he said gently. Watch. Listen. Strike only when necessary. Prisoner Mark, still dressed in Viltrumite jail clothes, simply observed with weary eyes. You think you've been through hell? He said quietly to no one in particular. No, hell is when you stop believing you'll ever make it out. Scarred Levy frowned, frustrated that everyone was talking like they were in an edit or something, and cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the meeting. If you're all quite finished with your posturing, we can... He was interrupted when Mohawk Mark tensed, his eyes widening in horror. The smug manner faded, leaving just genuine, unadulterated horror, something no one had ever seen from him before. Fuck, Mohawk murmured, then said louder. Fuck. In a rush, he traversed the warehouse floor, grabbed Scarred Levy by the collar, and smashed him into the wall. Are you fucking insane? He exclaimed, spittle pouring from his lips. You didn't tell us he was here. What are you talking about? Scarred Levy gasped out, fighting from Mohawk's hold. The other versions tensed, watching the encounter with confusion and concern. What's gotten into you? Sinister Mark snarled. Mohawk turned towards them, his face blanched with fright. Are your instincts as dull as your rotten brains? Don't you sense that? That overwhelming bloodlust? The warehouse fell silent as the other versions concentrated, expanding their augmented senses beyond their local surroundings. Their looks gradually altered, from confusion to anxiety to dawning fear. "What is that?" Viltrumite Mark asked, his customary confidence fading. Cold sweat formed on Mohawk's forehead and ran down his spine. His hands, still grasping Levi's collar, trembled significantly, a sight so out of character for his previous arrogance that several of the other versions exchanged concerned glances. Yellow Suit Mark asked, "Are you okay?" with genuine concern in his voice. They may all despise or dislike each other, but this spectacle was too weird to overlook. "No, I'm not fucking okay," Mohawk said, his voice lowering to a frantic whisper. "I've sensed this spiritual signature before. I truly had to live with that monster's shadow of death over the universe for a decade of conflict before he was dethroned." As the words left his mouth, the roof above them began to collapse. Concrete dust showered down as large fissures appeared on the warehouse top. The variations looked up, instinctively sliding into protective positions. A booming, gravelly voice resonated through the warehouse, sending shivers down the spines of even the toughest among them. "Stand ready for our arrival, worms." The ceiling collapsed completely, and several individuals plummeted through the enormous hole. Conquest led the way, his scarred face twisted into a ferocious grin, his enormous bulk silhouetted against the night sky. Others followed him, including 2 copies of Mark and Eve, as well as Nolan dressed in his Omni-Man suit. But Mohawk's horrified gaze did not rest on any of them. He peered past them to the figure floating slightly higher than the rest, whose presence seemed to darken the entire atmosphere around him. "Naruto," Mohawk murmured, the word exiting his lips like a prayer of fear. The other versions prepared for war by activating their powers and tensing their muscles. But Mohawk's reaction was completely different. He shook scarred Levi with increased rage. "Send us back," he exclaimed. "Send us all the fuck back to our own dimensions. I am not about to eat my own heart for this crazy fucker's revenge plan in a world that apparently Naruto owns Earth. Why the fuck didn't you tell us this earlier?" Levi strained in his hands, his eyes wide and confused. "Something's wrong," he exclaimed. "Naruto was never supposed to be here. He doesn't rule this Earth. No Viltrumite rules this Earth." "I don't fucking care," Mohawk exclaimed, spittle pouring from his lips. "Send us back already, or I'll—" His remarks were cut short when a whirl of motion passed him. Mohawk's worry had prevented him from adequately focusing on the coming threat. Royal Mark had already ripped scarred Levi from his hold and pinned him against the opposite wall. "Nobody is going anywhere," Royal Mark said, a wicked sneer developing across his face as he addressed all the versions, "not till you all are in pieces everywhere." The wicked versions tensed, preparing for war. Sinister Mark's hands tightened into fists, a calculating calculation in his gaze as he examined the arrivals. Viltrumite Mark adopted a combat stance that exactly mimicked Imperial training regulations. Omni Mark's eyes began to shine with a growing energy. Conquest, sensing Mohawk's apprehension and assumed he must be the leader because everyone seemed preoccupied with his next move, charged forward with devastating speed. His big fist was aimed right at Mohawk's face. To everyone's amazement, Mohawk did not counterattack. Instead, he used a desperate move to soar past Conquest and up through the hole in the roof. Instead of running, he did something that caused everyone to freeze in place. He dropped to one knee in midair before Naruto, head bowed, in a position of complete submission. "Please," Mohawk implored, his voice devoid of its old cockiness. "Emperor Naruto, I surrender." Completely. The warehouse went silent. Everyone glanced at Naruto, waiting for his reaction. The Emperor looked at the kneeling version with mild curiosity, his gigantic arms crossed over his chest, the battle beast code rippling in the night breeze. "Curious," Naruto's rich voice cut through the silence. "Why does one with such strength not wish to fight? Surely one nearing conquest in might would have more will. One does not gain such strength by being a coward." Despite his horror, Mohawk reacted somewhat to the accusation. "With all due with all due respect, Emperor," he struggled to keep his words in check, "knowing when to pick your battles isn't cowardice. I know better than anyone how strong you are." Naruto's interest grew significantly. "How so? Do you know me in your universe?" Mohawk nodded tentatively, still unwilling to meet Naruto's gaze squarely. "I've seen you fight. Comparing us fighting you is like comparing a human child against a Viltrumite officer." He choked on his. "No, perhaps the difference is even bigger." Naruto looked at him for a moment, his penetrating gaze appearing to see through Mohawk's very soul. "Such fear cannot come merely from witnessing battle. How have you come upon this knowledge? Cold sweat raced down Mohawk's back as those piercing eyes stared at him from above. He knew lying would be pointless. Something about Naruto's look convinced him that the Emperor would detect any untruth immediately. There was a war, Mohawk said, his voice barely above a whisper. In my universe, between the Viltrum Empire and our Naruto. It lasted a decade. Eventually, Naruto died, and I, as Argal's last descendant, was crowned emperor. What? Conquest screamed, his scarred face contorted with rage. How dare you speak such absurdity? How could the Viltrum Empire ever betray their lord, their true emperor Naruto? Mohawk disregarded Conquest's rage, focusing entirely on Naruto, who looked at him with a calculated face. Explain, Naruto said simply. In my universe, Mohawk said tentatively, our Naruto was unstable. More so than you, Emperor, he. How did you defeat him? Original Mark said, unable to suppress his interest. Mohawk remained motionless, seemingly hesitant to continue, until Naruto nodded slightly. I, too, am curious about this, the Emperor said. Mohawk took a deep breath. The war lasted nearly an entire decade. It was the entire Viltrum Empire, Earth, and the coalition against Naruto alone. His tone became more gravelly. As an Argal descendant with a pure lineage, I went to the Flaxen dimension where time travels faster. There, I impregnated many women and had hundreds of offspring who grew up swiftly in the accelerated time flow. This provided us with an almost limitless army of Viltrumites to throw upon Naruto. Everyone present came to realize how horrific what he was describing was. But even then, Mohawk said, his voice flat, Naruto was too powerful. He could kill any Viltrumite with a single blow. We fought him for a decade till he died of fatigue, but at what cost? He closed his eyes briefly. Trillions upon trillions dead. Entire galaxies reduced to ash. After this revelation, there was a startled stillness. Original Mark and Eve exchanged terrified looks. Royal Mark unconsciously reached for Royal Eve's hand and squeezed it strongly. Nolan's face had become pale, and Conquest's expression was a mix of surprise and grudging respect. Amanda and Roberta exchanged a knowing gaze. They had always understood Naruto's power academically, but seeing it confirmed by someone who had seen it firsthand was depressing. And I can sense, Mohawk said, his voice cracking slightly, that you're even stronger than our Naruto was. I don't know by how much, but I can feel it. Perhaps at least a dozen times stronger. He shook his head. We can't win against you. And I'd rather not die. He gazed up at Naruto with despair in his eyes. You being here, with two versions of Mark and Eve, must mean you're from another reality as well, having a way to travel between them. Probably with your own angstrom under your control. His speech had a desperate, begging tone. I can be of use to you, Emperor. My empire may not be as powerful as yours, but a universe that willingly submits, providing more troops and resources, is preferable to conquering and controlling one. I can do whatever you want. I already have control of my own universe. Everyone waited impatiently for Naruto to respond. The Emperor's countenance remained neutral as he weighed Mohawk's proposal. The hush lasted until it was almost uncomfortable. Finally, Naruto said, I can accept your proposal, he said, making Mohawk's face light up with relief. But on one condition. Anything, Emperor, Mohawk said happily. You must kill at least 2 other variants of yourself that are not allied with me, Naruto told you. If you do this, I will accept your proposal. Mohawk's relief turned into ferocious ecstasy. He rose, with Naruto's consent, cracking his neck to the side, eager to demonstrate his dedication. The other bad variations gritted their teeth in hatred over this betrayal. As for the rest of you, Naruto added, addressing the collected evil marks, I'll give you a chance too. Choose the strongest among you to fight my Mark, Nolan, and Conquest one-on-one. If they overcome them, I will spare those who, like Mohawk, submit to me. The malevolent variations exchanged glances, communicating silently. Despite their disagreements and animosity, they acknowledged the importance of the circumstances. After a difficult moment, they nodded in accord, allowing Sinister, Viltrumite, and Omni to stand forward as their champions. Take your battles to uninhabited areas, Naruto ordered. If there are civilian casualties, I will kill you all for wasting my resources. The 6 designated fighters faced off, Omni Mark versus Nolan, Sinister against Royal Mark, and Conquest against Viltrumite Mark. This is going to be fun, Conquest muttered, a nasty smirk on his face as he assessed his opponent. Let's see if you're worthy of that uniform, boy. I earned this uniform, unlike you, who only butchered weaklings, Viltrumite Mark said coldly, with a flicker of uncertainty on his face. You look like somebody who talks a big game, but surely you understand that you're about to become a stain on the landscape, Sinister was telling Royal Mark. He has truly taken Naruto's instructions to heart, inciting panic in the enemy before the conflict to force them to make mistakes, who only smiled, a cold, calculating face. Talk all you want. The difference between us, says Sinister, is that rather than talk I hit, and when I hit something, I make sure it stays down. Nolan and Omni Mark confronted each other, a bizarre mirror image, one who had decided to protect Earth and the other who had opted to conquer it with his father. I'm curious, what made you like this? Nolan inquired. You, Omni Mark corrected. You and your cowardice. It is why I have chosen to be what you would have become if you hadn't been a coward. Following these final exchanges, the three pairs rocketed skyward, shooting across the night sky in diverse directions, each looking for a suitable battleground for their confrontation. Amanda huffed in disappointment as they left. Come on. This doesn't give me a chance to test my new strength, she said, flexing her green-tinted fingers. As he glanced at her, Naruto's eyes softened just a little. He told her, you'll have a lot of chances in the future. This is more interesting for now. The other evil versions watched this fight with confusion and fear, getting ready to fight Mohawk. The Invincible War was about to enter its first real fight, and blood would soon color the sky over Chicago as the night went on. The stars in the night sky above the desert outside Chicago were bright, and the city's light didn't lessen them. Nolan Grayson was in this space with his son, or rather, a version of his son who had chosen quite different choices. Omni Mark floated 20 feet away, and his eyes were filled with a hatred so strong it was almost real. I've dreamed of this moment, Omni Mark remarked, and his voice carried effortlessly over the space between them. Seeing you again. Finishing what I started. Nolan looked at him closely and saw the small differences between him and his own Mark. This version had greater muscle and a more rigid posture, like a soldier. There was none of the kindness or humanity in his eyes that the Mark he knew had. Nolan asked, what happened between us in your world? Omni Mark's laugh was empty and sad. You trained me as soon as my powers showed up, which was a lot earlier than most Marks. You taught me every day that Viltrumites are better than everyone else. You got me ready to help take over Earth. His face hardened. And then, when the time came, you hesitated. You got weak, Nolan said, so you killed me, not as a question but as a fact. I did what I had to do, Omni Mark said, his voice getting harder. Isn't that the Viltrumite way? You taught me that the weak must be killed so the strong can live. Omni Mark attacked before Nolan could say anything, moving between them at lightning speed. His punch hit Nolan's jaw with a loud bang that could be heard all over the desert floor. Nolan fell back, surprised by how hard the attack was. He got better quickly, blocking the next punch and hitting Omni Mark back with a punch that sent him flying through the air. You fight like him, Omni Mark said, wiping blood from his lip and getting back on his feet. Exact. Under control. The same methods my father used before I ripped his heart out. Nolan's face stayed calm, but his eyes showed how heartbroken he was. Is that what you want? To kill me too? What I want, Omni Mark growled as he charged forward again, is for you to fight back the right way. When their fists hit each other in the air, the shockwave made a cloud of dust rise from the desert floor below. Conquest and Viltrumite Mark circled each other like predators over the peaceful waters of Lake Michigan, miles away. The moon's reflection on the lake below them rippled and changed shape from time to time because of the shockwaves from their powers colliding. You wear the uniform, Conquest hissed, his scarred face twisted in a sneer. But do you know what it means to be Viltrumite? Mark, a Viltrumite, kept his face chilly and calm, and his white outfit looked perfect in the moonlight. I grew up in the heart of the Empire and was trained by the elite guard. I know more about Viltrumite heritage than you could ever know. Conquest let out a loud laugh. Words. Just words from a kid playing soldier. They both launched at the same time, and their bodies hit each other with enough force to send ripples over the lake below. Conquest's huge fist hit Viltrumite Mark's jaw, and the younger warrior hit Conquest in the stomach with his knee. Neither of them gave in, and their hands locked together as they pushed against each other, testing raw strength against raw strength. Their foreheads bulged with veins as they pushed against each other in this first test of strength. Not bad, Conquest said, not too happy with it. You do have some strength in you after all. I was made for this, Viltrumite Mark said between clenched teeth. Every cell in my body is made to be great at fighting. They were still stuck in a standoff, and neither was able to get the upper hand until, with a sudden rush of energy, they both used the same move. A violent headbutt. Their foreheads hit each other with a loud crack that echoed across the sea. Conquest staggered back, briefly confused. Viltrumite Mark, on the other hand, became better a fraction of a second faster and took advantage of this by throwing a flurry of blows that pushed Conquest down toward the lake's surface. Conquest turned away just before they hit, and Viltrumite Mark punched through the water with enough force to make a hole in the lake for a short time. As the water rushed back to fill the space, Viltrumite Mark ascended again and floated above the swirling surface. He opened his arms wide and looked at the scenery in front of him, which was lit by the moon. He yelled out to Conquest, who was getting his bearings back nearby, "Tell me, what is your Naruto like?" "The Emperor. The old quarry outside of Chicago has turned into a battlefield." Royal Mark and Sinister slammed into the stone walls, making new caves with each hit. As they fought, dust and debris filled the air. Their punches would have broken mountains. Sinister said, "You're holding back," and his scarred face broke into a smile that wasn't warm. "Are you scared to let the monster out? Are you scared you might like it?" Royal Mark circled cautiously, staying away for now. This version of him was dangerous, not just because he was strong, but also because he was crazy in a way that made him feel uneasy. Royal Mark said firmly, "I'm not like you." "Not yet," Sinister said, his eyes shining with evil fun. "But we all have to start somewhere. For me, it started when I saw how easy it was to just take what I wanted." All of a sudden, he lunged forward and hit Royal Mark's chest with his fist, breaking ribs. Royal Mark hit Sinister with an uppercut that sent him flying into the quarry wall, where loads of rock fell. Sinister came out of the rubble and calmly brushed himself off. "You know, the first time is always the hardest. That moment when you cross the line." He licked the blood from his split lip with his tongue. "I didn't mean to kill him, but then I felt his skull give way under my fist, and I felt the warm spray of blood." He closed his eyes, as if he were enjoying the memories. It was like a drug. Royal Mark's face stiffened with disdain. "You're sick." "I'm free," Sinister said, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Free from the chains of morality that hold you back. Do you know what it's like to take a life and feel nothing but power?" He hit again, this time with a flurry of blows that were too rapid for the human eye to see. Royal Mark blocked most of them, but a few got through and pushed him back into the quarry floor with enough force to make a crater. Sinister landed next to him and put a foot on Royal Mark's chest. After that first kill, the rest were easier. Villains. Heroes who got in my way. Eventually. His smile grew bigger. Eventually, anyone who looked at me wrong. Royal Mark grabbed Sinister's ankle and twisted it hard, which made him lose his equilibrium. He also pushed himself up and headbutted Sinister hard enough to break the variant's nose. As they pulled apart, blood spilled between them and they circled again. Sinister wiped blood from his face with the back of his hand and said, "You know what the best part is? They taste just like chicken." Nolan avoided another onslaught from Omnimark, and their fight had moved across miles of desert. The ground below them changed, with craters indicating their impacts and ditches made by bodies thrown at speeds faster than sound. Omnimark asked, his voice full of anger, "Why won't you fight me, right?" "Stop holding back." "I'm not holding back," Nolan said in a calm voice. "I've decided not to kill you. That's different." This seemed to make Omnimark even angrier. He charged again, this time getting Nolan in a bear grip and sending them both crashing to the ground with terrible force. The hit made a hole that was 50 feet wide. Omnimark pushed Nolan down, his hands around the older Viltrumite's throat, as dust settled around them. "He's weak," Omnimark growled, his face just inches from Nolan's. "My father. He spent years teaching me that Earth was nothing and that people were just animals waiting to be killed. But when the time came, he couldn't do it." Even though the pressure on his windpipe was too much for him, Nolan stayed cool. He inquired, "What happened?" in a strained but calm voice. Omnimark's grasp becomes stronger. "I got my powers when I was 12. From then on, he trained me non-stop. I had no childhood, no friends, just preparation for our great purpose. To take over Earth for the Viltrum Empire." He seemed to be looking far away, lost in thought. "I was ready by the time I was 16. We were going to start with the Guardians of the Globe, just like he said. But when the time came..." His voice broke a little. "He looked at me and said he couldn't do it. He said he had come to care about this world and wanted us to protect it instead. Nolan utilized the brief attention to break Omni Mark's hold by kicking him hard and flinging him off. They both stood up and faced each other across the crater. Nolan asked, "And that made you so mad that you wanted to kill him?" "He betrayed everything," Omni Mark yelled. "Everything he taught me. Everything I gave up for. He turned me into a weapon and then told me not to hit." He attacked again, but this time Nolan was ready for him. He avoided the charge by using Omni Mark's speed to flip him over his shoulder and throw him to the ground. "So you killed him," Nolan remarked, looking down at the younger Viltrumite. "And then what? Did taking over Earth give you the happiness you wanted?" Omni Mark's answer was another onslaught, full of wrath. Conquest answered Viltrumite Mark's query by saying, "Our Emperor is the embodiment of Viltrumite perfection. Strength beyond measure, tempered with wisdom that surpasses any ruler in our history." They flew around each other over the lake, having formed a wary regard after their earlier fight. "Did he conquer Earth by himself?" Viltrumite Mark inquired, sounding genuinely curious. "In one day," Conquest said, his voice full with triumph. "Without spilling a single drop of human blood. He showed such incredible strength that it was impossible to fight back. Instead of destroying, he raised the Viltrumite order and technology to make life better for humans." Mark's face changed from one of boredom to one of growing interest. "My world of Naruto is different. It's more reactive than proactive. He sits on his throne, giving orders but not doing much himself. He sends his minions to conquer worlds while he stays far away and out of sight." Conquest laughed. "A weak copy of the real Emperor." "Maybe," Viltrumite Mark said. "I've often wondered why. He has the same strength and potential, but..." Conquest's sudden strike stopped their chat. His fist hit Viltrumite Mark's jaw with enough force to send him spinning across the lake. Mark from Viltrumite soon got back on his feet and kicked Conquest in the ribs. They hit each other a lot, and each hit made a little sonic boom that shook the water below. Neither side had an obvious edge since their skills were too evenly matched for a rapid settlement. After a fight that was especially fierce and had both of them breathe heavily, they parted again, staying about 100 feet apart. Conquest said, "You fight well," with a hint of resentment. "Few can hit me as hard as I can." Mark, a Viltrumite, nodded to show that he understood the praise. "I had the best training, but training can only make up for so much natural talent." He seemed to be thinking for a time. "I suppose that's the problem with Naruto in my society. He was born the strongest, gifted by the skies, and given power beyond measure by God, but he wastes it. He doesn't get that with that kind of power comes the responsibility to utilize it to change the universe directly instead of through others." Conquest's scarred visage looked surprised by this intellectual turn. "You talk almost like the Emperor himself." "Do I?" Viltrumite Mark inquired with a faint smile. "Maybe that's why I'm interested in what Mohawk said. To learn that I am Argal's grandson gives me a claim to the throne, but..." He shook his head. "What good is a throne if you can't use it right?" He gazed straight at Conquest, his face set. "I want to meet your Naruto in person. To serve an emperor that exemplifies what Viltrum should be. Not simply conquest, but also growth and change for everyone." Another attack was Conquest's answer. Royal Mark said plainly, "You're a cannibal," and he sounded disgusted as he wiped blood from a gash above his eye. Sinister shrugged and moved around him with the grace of a predator. "Labels are too limiting. I like to think of it as recycling. Why throw away all that protein?" This time, Royal Mark attacked first, and they fought again. He hit Sinister in the stomach with his fist hard enough to make him bend over, then he hit him in the face with his knee, which made teeth fly. Sinister spat blood, and his smile was missing a few teeth. "There it is," he remarked, seeming happy. "That anger. That violence. You're not so different from me after all." Royal Mark growled, "I'm nothing like you," and then he hit Sinister with a series of punches that pushed him back. "No," Sinister teased, blocking some blows while others hit him hard. "Then why are you having so much fun?" Royal Mark was caught off guard by the question, which gave Sinister the chance to hit him with a brutal headbutt that split the skin on both of their foreheads. As they fought, blood poured down their faces and they crashed through the quarry wall and into the hillside next to it. As they fought, Sinister said, "I've killed hundreds. Anyone who looked at me wrong, anyone who crossed me, men, women, and children." His voice got lower, almost like he was talking to someone close to him. "And do you know what the best part was? When they figured out what was going on and saw who I am." Royal Mark got away, creating space between them. "And what is that?" "The apex predator," Sinister said, his eyes shining with insanity. the top of the food chain. The parents of the monsters tell their kids about it. He hit Royal Mark again, this time sending him tumbling through several layers of rock. Royal Mark came out, spitting blood and with a soiled, tattered uniform. You know what's funny? Sinister went on, not letting up on his attacks or his mind games. I started with bad guys. People who everyone agreed should die. Then heroes who got in my way. Then regular people who saw too much. He laughed as he avoided Royal Mark's counterattack. I ate the first family by mistake. I was hungry after a fight, and they were just there. I had been told for so long that they were cattle, and well, it was the wrong place at the wrong time. Royal Mark was so angry that he tackled Sinister with enough force to send them both deep into the ground. They came out seconds later, fighting as they climbed into the night sky. Her daughter tasted the sweetest, Sinister said in a low voice, close to Royal Mark's ear. So soft. So, Royal Mark's control eventually broke, cutting short the last of his speech. Nolan pinned Omni Mark to the ground in the desert, and the younger Viltrumite couldn't get away because of his superior technique. Even though Omni Mark was very strong and angry, Nolan had the upper hand because he had been doing this for hundreds of years. Listen to me, Nolan said, his voice strong but not harsh. Taking over Earth didn't fill the void. Killing your father didn't bring you peace. Nothing will, as long as you're angry. What do you know about it? Omni Mark spat, still fighting. More than you might think, Nolan said. I used to think like you do, that being better than Viltrumites made any action okay and that conquering was our birthright. I was wrong. Omni Mark stopped fighting and squinted his eyes. So you're just like him, weak and sentimental. No, Nolan said. I am stronger now than I was as a conqueror. It takes more strength to protect than to destroy. It takes more courage to love than to rule. Omni Mark's eyes twitched for a moment, as if a fracture had appeared in his tough facade. He said something like that. Right before His voice faded out. Nolan let him go and stepped back. Before you killed him. Omni Mark slowly got up, and his stance was no longer threatening, but it was somehow lessened. He looked at me with such disappointment. Not fear, not anger. Just sadness, as if I'd let him down in some way. Yes, you did, Nolan answered softly. But not in the way you think. You didn't get what he learned. That there are things more important than power. Love, protection, and connection are not weaknesses. They're the only things that give power meaning. Omni Mark's face twisted in a complicated mix of feelings. Anger, uncertainty, and, below it all, a grief so deep it felt like it was weighing him down. I was a child, he said in a voice that sounded much younger. A child doing what I was told to do. What I thought was right. Nolan responded softly, I know. Omni Mark asked, appearing confused, and now? What am I now? Nolan did something unexpected instead of answering. He came forward and hugged Omni Mark like a father would hug a son. Omni Mark stayed stiff in the hug for a moment. Then he fell against Nolan with a sound that was half roar and half sob, letting out years of pain that had been hidden. He cried, I killed him, and his whole body shook. I killed my dad. I killed him. Nolan embraced him tighter, and his own eyes were wet. I know, son, I know. The fight between Conquest and Viltrumite Mark has gotten even more violent. The lake underneath them had changed. Each contact sent huge waves out in all directions, and the water was pushed away by the energy of their fight. Even though they were fighting hard, they were starting to appreciate each other oddly. They both saw the other as a worthy opponent, a real Viltrumite warrior. After a particularly severe encounter that left both of them bleeding from several wounds, Conquest said, You fight like someone who was born to fight. And you fight like the stories say, Viltrumite Mark said back. Even in my world, people talk about how fierce Conquest is. Once more, they fought, and this time Conquest came out on top. He had fought for hundreds of years, so he could predict Viltrumite Mark's attacks and respond with precise hits that slowly weakened the younger warrior's defenses. An especially strong punch drove Viltrumite Mark crashing into the lake, making a huge splash that could be seen for miles. Then Conquest dove under the sea to keep fighting below the surface. Their motions were a little slower underwater, but they were still deadly. They hit each other, generating pressure waves that killed fish as the shock waves broke their swim bladders. Mark, a Viltrumite, tried to come up for air, but Conquest grabbed his ankle and pulled him deeper. Even in the dark depths, you could see the ancient warrior's smile. He didn't want his opponent to be able to breathe. But Viltrumite Mark was ready for situations like this. Rather than pushing himself up, He switched things up and slammed his fist into Conquest's stomach hard enough to knock the wind out of the older Viltrumite. With bubbles escaping from Conquest's mouth, Viltrumite Mark saw his chance and quickly grabbed Conquest by the throat. He shot upward, bursting through the lake's surface in a huge splash of water. They floated just above the swirling water, both struggling to catch their breath, their uniforms drenched and tattered. "Yield," Conquest urged, catching his breath. "Never," Mark said, though you could see how tired he was. They charged at each other once more, and the impact made a thunderous sound that echoed over the lake. This time, Viltrumite Mark got the upper hand on Conquest, managing to catch him in a hold that kept the ancient warrior's arms pinned down, making him vulnerable. "I could take you out right now," Viltrumite Mark said, his voice tight as he kept the grip steady. "Go ahead and do it," Conquest said with a growl. "Go ahead and finish it, if you think you can." Mark, the Viltrumite, tightened his grip for a moment, but then, to Conquest's surprise, he let go completely. He moved back, keeping a defensive stance but not making any more attacks. "I don't want to kill you, Mark," the Viltrumite said. "I'd love to join you in this journey. I want to learn from your emperor and be part of something that's more meaningful than just fighting for the sake of fighting." Conquest looked at him carefully, trying to spot any signs of trickery but finding nothing at all. "What makes you think I should trust you? You know I could have taken you out just now," Viltrumite Mark said casually. "You know, we both could have taken each other out a bunch of times during our fight. It's been more about testing each other than actually trying to kill, right?" A slow, hesitant smile crept onto Conquest's scarred face. "You know, it's interesting. A lot of people probably wouldn't have picked up on that. I was trained to look beyond what's right in front of me," Mark, the Viltrumite, said. "To get a grasp on the underlying forces at play in a battle." Conquest nodded, and just like that, a decision was made. "The Emperor's the one who'll decide what happens next. If he thinks you're up to it, you might just end up working with me. That's all I ask," Viltrumite Mark said, nodding his head as a sign of respect. Royal Mark was completely changed by his anger. The strategic fighter was gone, and in their place was something raw and frightening. He went after Sinister with a fierceness that looked like it caught even the cannibalistic version off guard. Their fight had turned into something that hardly resembled a clash between thinking beings. It was more like animals ripping at each other with wild rage. They were biting, clawing, and headbutting, with every hit feeling like it could take down a whole building. "Absolutely," Sinister chuckled, his lips stained with blood. "This is exactly what I was hoping for. Let me see the real you." Royal Mark just stayed quiet. He threw a punch that landed right on Sinister's jaw, and you could hear the awful crack as it dislocated. Before Sinister had a chance to bounce back, Royal Mark landed a knee right in his stomach, making him double over. Then, with a swift elbow to the back of the head, he sent Sinister crashing down to the quarry floor. Sinister fought to get up, spitting out teeth and blood. "You think you can kill me?" he teased. "I don't think you have it in you. Not really." Royal Mark landed next to him, his face tight with anger. "I think you might be mistaken." He took hold of Sinister by the throat, hoisting him up off the ground. Sinister was kicking and struggling, his jaw all messed up and hanging at a weird angle. "I can kill," Royal Mark said, his voice surprisingly calm even though his eyes were filled with rage. "Sometimes it's needed. To keep others safe. To avoid bigger issues. You can't do that." "Not like this," Sinister struggled to say through his injured jaw. "Not in a cold-hearted way. This isn't cold blood," Royal Mark said. "This is justice. For all the people you've killed. Everyone you've taken." Sinister's eyes grew wide when he understood that Royal Mark was being serious. He pushed through his struggles, finding a sudden surge of strength to break free. He took a step back, looking to create some space between them. "Hold on," he said, his confidence slipping away. "Let's chat about this. I can make some changes. I can..." Royal Mark was on him in a flash, tackling him with such force that they both crashed through the quarry floor and into the underground caverns below. In the dark, they kept fighting, with the sounds of rocks breaking and their heavy breaths filling the air. When they came back into view, it was obvious that Sinister was struggling. He moved slowly, and it was easy to counter his attacks. Blood was spilling from several wounds, and his uniform was in shreds. "Please," he pleaded as Royal Mark moved closer to him. "Mercy. Did you show mercy to the family you devoured?" Royal Mark asked, his voice low and tense. "Are you talking about the daughter you mentioned who tasted sweet?" Sinister's eyes scanned the area, searching for a way out. With no other options left, He made one last desperate move, lunging at Royal Mark with every bit of strength he had left. Royal Mark dodged the awkward attack and, in a surprising twist, grabbed Sinister's head with both hands. He let out a roar that bounced around the quarry as he twisted sharply. The sound of Sinister's neck breaking echoed like a gunshot in the night. But Royal Mark still had more to say. In a brutal turn of events that would have shocked everyone who knew him, he kept twisting until Sinister's head came off entirely. Blood splattered all over Royal Mark's face and chest as he stood there, gripping the severed head of his wicked counterpart, his breath coming in quick, uneven gasps. Little by little, he started to come back to himself, and his eyes began to show signs of awareness. He glanced at what he was holding, at what he had done, and for a moment, it looked like he might be sick. Then his expression turned serious once more. "Justice," he murmured quietly to himself. "That's all there is to it." Back at the warehouse, the remaining evil variants were on edge as Mohawk Mark swooped down from the sky, landing on the concrete floor with a loud thud. He was pulling along two bodies behind him, Phantom Mark and Maskless Mark, and it was obvious they were both dead. He just tossed them down at Naruto's feet and then knelt again, head down. "Just as you ordered, Emperor. I've taken care of two of them myself." The other variants were all tensed up, prepared for either a fight or a quick getaway, but Naruto just stood there, not making a move against them. He was perched on what looked like a makeshift throne, a pile of shipping containers set up to hold his hefty frame, observing the events unfold with a cool, detached gaze. Amanda was standing to his right, looking pretty impressive in her enhanced form, with her green-tinged skin shining softly in the low light of the warehouse. Roberta moved to his left, her keen eyes scanning the different options in front of them, weighing the risks and what could happen next. Mark and Eve stayed close, looking worried as they watched the evil versions of Mark. "These were the roads we didn't go down, the decisions that might have taken us to a darker place instead of one of heroism." Out of nowhere, Naruto's eyes, which had been shut as if he were deep in thought, flew open. "They're all done," he said casually. Just like that, three figures popped up through the hole in the warehouse ceiling. Nolan went down first, helping a quiet Omni-Mark who looked fine on the outside but was clearly struggling on the inside. His eyes had a red rim, and he looked like he was carrying a heavy weight on his mind. Then, Conquest and Viltrumite Mark showed up, both looking a bit worse for wear from their fight, but there was a sense of respect between them instead of any animosity. They found themselves on opposite sides of the warehouse, but this time there was none of the tension that had defined their earlier encounter. At last, Royal Mark came back by himself, his uniform drenched in blood, looking serious. He had something wrapped up in what was left of his cape, a bundle that made it pretty clear what had happened to Sinister. Naruto looked over the returning fighters, giving a small nod of satisfaction as he took in the results. "Just as I thought," he said softly, getting up from his makeshift throne. The evil variants exchanged glances, and you could see the uncertainty written all over their faces. With Mohawk turning on them, Sinister gone, and both Omni-Mark and Viltrumite Mark seemingly switching sides, their chances of pulling this off had taken a hit. Naruto looked at them, his face giving nothing away as he thought about what would happen next. The hospital room was pretty quiet, except for the gentle beeping of the medical machines. Sunlight poured in through the half-drawn blinds, creating a dance of light and shadow on the plain white bed where Eve lay still. Dark Mark sat next to her, his fingers playfully twirling a strand of her hair. He had this calm, almost serene look on his face, which was such a stark contrast to all the horrors he had brought into the world, especially for her. "Wow, your hair is coming back fast," he said, his tone soft, which somehow made what he said feel even more unsettling. "The nurses mentioned it's a good sign that your health is getting better. Isn't that great, Eve?" She stayed quiet, with her eyes being the only thing that could still move around freely. They focused on the ceiling, making sure not to meet his eyes. The paralysis that took over her body from the neck down didn't touch her mind, her thoughts, or her hatred. It just made it hard for her to show them. "So, the resistance in the eastern quadrant fell yesterday," Dark Mark said, almost like he was chatting about the weather. "They thought they could just disappear into those old subway tunnels. Like anything on this planet could actually escape me." He smiled, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. 43 casualties. That's definitely a cleaner outcome compared to last week's operation. Eve's eyes flickered for a moment, the only sign of the grief that washed over her. 43 more friends, allies, maybe even folks she had brought into the fold, just like that, gone. How many people lost their lives because she couldn't stop him? The number was just overwhelming. It made me want to cry. Dad says we'll have full control of the continent by the end of the month. The European resistance is being pretty stubborn. He frowned a bit. But you know they'll break eventually. They all do. He gently brushed his hand against her cheek, the softness of his touch sending butterflies fluttering in her stomach. You know, Eve, I've been thinking about what our future could look like. Once all this tough stuff is behind us, how about a cozy house somewhere peaceful, away from the hustle and bustle of the cities? Just the two of us, he said, letting his hand drift down a bit. The monitor keeping an eye on Eve's heart rate gave her away, the steady beeping picking up pace just a bit. Dark Mark saw this and his smile got even bigger. You get it? Your body knows we're meant to be, he said softly, moving in closer. You're the only one who keeps me grounded. You're the one who truly matters to me. Eve felt a tear slip from the corner of her eye, making its way down her temple and into her hair. She despised this weakness, this feeling of betrayal from her own body, revealing her fear, but there was no way to stop it. I just couldn't get rid of it. She felt this rage bubbling up inside her, but every time his hand touched her gently, it just made it harder to let it out. Don't cry, Dark Mark said gently, using his thumb to wipe away the tear. It can definitely feel like a lot to handle. I have so much love for you. I know you'll get it in time. You'll realize that everything I've done, everything we've created together, has been for us. The sunlight pouring in through the window suddenly faded, like a cloud had just drifted in front of the sun, but the shadow that suddenly fell over them was just too sudden, too sharp. Dark Mark frowned and glanced over at the window. A huge figure was standing there, outlined by the afternoon sun. He's got broad shoulders and an imposing presence, not to mention that distinctive mustache that stands out even in the shadows. Dark Mark jumped up right away, his years of combat experience kicking in. Who is it? He didn't even finish his question before he charged at the intruder, fist outstretched. The punch landed squarely on the figure's face, but it was like hitting a brick wall. A sickening crack filled the room as Dark Mark's arm broke on impact, sending bone fragments tearing through muscle and skin. He yelled, stumbling back, holding onto his twisted arm. What the hell? He exclaimed, his face twisted in pain and disbelief. Who are you? The figure walked into the room, and Eve's eyes grew wide as she recognized the man from the propaganda posters, a mix of fear and familiarity washing over her. Naruto. But little did she know, it wasn't the Naruto from her world. Man, what a letdown, Naruto said, his voice echoing in the cozy little room. So different from the boy I've started to think of as my own nephew. Dark Mark stumbled back, a mix of confusion and pain etched across his face. What are you saying, Grand Regent? I'm not your Grand Regent, Naruto said, stepping forward slowly. You're not the Mark Grayson I remember at all. Just as Dark Mark was about to say something, Naruto zipped into action with lightning-fast speed. A huge hand wrapped around Dark Mark's throat, effortlessly lifting him off the ground. The other grabbed his torso. Eve shut her eyes, but she just couldn't shake off the wet, tearing noise that came next, along with Dark Mark's sudden, cut-off scream. When she opened her eyes again, there was Naruto, standing there with two separate halves of the guy who had been a nightmare for her for months, blood dripping from his hands onto the clean hospital floor. He casually tossed the leftovers aside and shifted his focus to the doorway, where someone new had just shown up. Mark? Nolan called out, sounding both confused and a bit alarmed. Then his eyes landed on Naruto, and he couldn't help but widen in shock as he took in the whole scene, the blood, the scattered remains, and there was Naruto right in the middle of it all. Grand Regent? What's going on here? My son. It was a disgrace, Naruto said, his tone icy. You are too. Nolan felt the danger and got into a defensive stance, but you could see the fear in his eyes. We've stuck by Viltrum. We took over this planet just like we were told. Whatever you think we've done. Naruto cut him off before he could finish. In a flash, he was right in front of Nolan, his huge hand wrapping around the Viltrumite's face. Nolan was having a tough time, his hands gripping Naruto's arm, but it felt like trying to move a whole planet. Eve looked away while Naruto applied pressure, not able to bear the sight. Yet, deep down, there was a part of her, one that was dark and hurt, that felt a rush of satisfaction as her tormentors finally faced justice. The squelchy noise that came next revealed all she had to understand. The room was quiet, with only the steady beeping of the medical equipment and the soft drip of blood from Naruto's hands breaking the stillness. Eve carefully looked back and caught him staring at her, his face giving nothing away. Moving with a surprising gentleness that didn't quite match his size or the chaos he had just caused, Naruto made his way over to her bed. He settled into the chair that Dark Mark had been using, easing himself down into it with careful grace. The quiet hung in the air, with blood still dripping from his large body onto the stark white hospital floor. When he finally opened his mouth, his voice came out surprisingly soft. "I'm from another reality," he said casually. "Have you heard about stuff like that? The multiverse?" Eve took a moment to process everything and then gave a small nod. It was barely noticeable, but it was the best she could do given her condition. "In my world, I'm the Emperor of the Viltrum Empire," Naruto said, carrying on. "I've taken over Earth, but you know, unlike these." He waved his hand at the remains. "Fools, I did it the smart way. No bloodshed. No unnecessary suffering." Eve kept a close eye on him, struggling to match this well-spoken, almost kind giant with the fierce figure who had just ripped two Viltrumites apart with his own hands. "You know, in my world, your counterpart has become important to me," Naruto said, a flicker of what seemed like discomfort passing over his face. "I've started to see her like a daughter, but I'm not sure if she thinks of me as a father figure." Eve's eyes grew a bit wider at these surprising words. "You're not her," Naruto said. "I'm not your world's Naruto, but when I heard about your situation from my world's Angstrom Levy, I just had to do something." He took a moment, looking a bit taken aback by what he just said. "This isn't like me. I usually don't act on a whim. Maybe my time here has changed me more than I thought." He was starting to behave more like his old self, more like Samael, he realized inside. Maybe it was that he finally started to sense the connection Samael experienced instead of just feeling the loneliness of being the solitary emperor. He went quiet once more, looking at her with those eyes that felt like they could see right into her soul. "So, Angstrom will be showing up soon with some doctors from my world," he said, continuing the conversation. "They have this amazing Viltrumite medical technology that can fix your spine. You'll be able to move again, just like you want to." He got up from the chair, standing tall beside her bed. "I'll let you get some rest until they get here." As he turned to leave, Eve felt a rush of frantic energy. With all her determination, she tapped into her powers, those incredible molecular manipulation abilities that had turned her into a powerful hero in the past. Pink energy flickered weakly around her right hand, making it move despite the paralysis that had taken hold, something she hadn't tried to do in months. Each time she did, Dark Mark would tighten his grip on her even more, asserting his claim over her. She reached out, her hand shaking a bit, and took hold of Naruto's big hand. "Please," she whispered, her voice rough from not being used for a while. "Please stay." Naruto stopped in his tracks, glancing down at her hand resting on his face showing real surprise. After a brief pause, he settled back into the chair. Once more, silence settled between them, but Eve held onto his hand, finding comfort in their connection. With another burst of pink energy, she tried to lift herself into a sitting position. Naruto noticed her having a tough time, so he softly put his other hand behind her back, giving her the support she needed to stand up straight. What happened next caught them off guard. Eve, feeling a whirlwind of emotions, relief, grief, hope, suddenly leaned into Naruto's chest. Even though her thin arms couldn't wrap around his huge frame, she held on tight, pressing her face against the blood-stained battle beast coat. "Thank you," she cried, her words tumbling out in a shaky stream. "Thanks a bunch, thanks a bunch, thanks a bunch." Naruto stood there for a few seconds, looking a bit unsure about how to react to what he just saw. He gently returned the hug, one big hand cradling her back while the other softly patted her shoulder. "You're safe now," he said casually. Eve just kept crying, all those years of feeling helpless and scared coming out in a wave of tears. She cried for the friends she had lost, for the world that had crumbled, for the body that had let her down, and for the future that had slipped away. But underneath all that sadness was something she believed she had lost for good: hope. Naruto wrapped his arms around her as she cried, his face softening into what looked like genuine compassion. This wasn't the Eve he knew, not the young woman he had come to think of as a daughter in his own world. But right now, in this moment of vulnerability, that distinction just didn't seem to matter. Stay tuned for more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I'm thrilled you watched the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for even more exciting content coming your way soon.